My name is Chati, and I have been teaching yoga for the past 19 years and also been more recently studying and facilitating Qigong for the last 5 years. So in this time together, I'll be sharing the mindful movement, and the mindful movement we'll be doing together will be a combination of different things: yoga, Qigong, somatics. You do not need a yoga mat. We're doing mostly sitting in our chair poses, or the invitation is to stand. So we'll talk about that more when we get to it. But I've been on faculty with the CBR program here at Garrison for the last 6 years, and I'm so excited to be here and to teach for the first time with Sharon.
Thank you so much. Hi, I'm really delighted to be with you all today, to be with Chati. And I have been practicing meditation for a million years, since 1971. I've been teaching meditation since 1974, so really a long time. I went to India as a college student. That's how it all began for me. And in many ways, I haven't looked back. And so I've had the chance to see the use of meditation as it got somewhat more popular in this country, and to see the beginnings of the science and the research, which gave it a whole other language of expression. And these days, as well as teaching just in general, whoever appears, I've spent a fair amount of time, and often through the Garrison Institute, working with people who are really serving others in some way. They are personal caregivers in their family. Professionally, they are caregivers. Many people who are first responders, or really on the front lines of complexity, difficulty, tremendous responsibility, and wanting to just be excellent at what they do and also have a personal sense of well-being. So that's a good bit of my life. Why don't we do a very brief, just a grounding meditation to more fully arrive. Each one of us has expended energy to get here, and leaving, responsibility and other things aside. So you can just sit comfortably, close your eyes if you like. Don't feel like you have to sit in some pretzel-like pose and be uncomfortable. Really be at ease. Mostly grounding exercises are ways of us to be more present with our senses, to take in what's happening. You can start with just seeing, even if your eyes are closed. You can notice whatever may be happening in your visual field. Sometimes there are little patterns of light. And if your eyes are open and you see your mind take off, oh, that's a nice lamp. I need another lamp. Where can I get another lamp? Something like that. Come back to simply seeing. No judgment, no haste. Just recognize, let's just see for now. And whatever you may be hearing, of course, we like certain sounds and we don't like others. But see, unless you are responsible for responding to the sound, see if you can just have it wash through you. We don't have to chase after it to hold on or push away. Just these waves of sound coming and going. What you feel sitting, what you feel in your body. Not uncommonly, we're like so tense, as though we were holding up our body in midair rather than having the chair or the ground supporting us. So allow yourself to be supported. And then the breath, just the normal, natural breath. However it's appearing, however it's changing. See if you can find the place where the breath is strongest for you or clearest for you. Maybe that's the nostrils, maybe it's the chest or the abdomen. Find that place. And the word is rest, just rest. See if you can feel one breath. And see if there's a word that exemplifies just sort of your current mood or state. Sleepy, interested, joyous, sorrowful, whatever it might be. It's like you're taking the temperature of your emotional landscape. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze, and we'll end that meditation exercise. So here we are.
Thank you so much. So the CPR program, which stands for Contemplative-Based Resilience Program, was designed with people like you in mind, people who are in service to other people, and people who may be experiencing a very stressful or demanding job situation or even home situation. I think everyone in life can benefit from understanding how our bodies and brains and nervous systems react to stress, so that we can just have a little bit more information of why we act and react the ways we do, so that we don't think like, oh, there's something going on with me or there's something wrong with me. So if anything, we hope that our program depathologizes how we might react to stress. So the CPR program is a combination of 3 components, which is psychosocial education. We'll be talking about the psychology of stress. We'll be also talking about how stress affects the nervous system. We'll be talking about emotional balance and compassion and how those 2 things strengthen resilience. It's one thing to talk about and understand stress. It's another thing to really think about, how can I bolster my innate inner strengths and foster skills to help me navigate skillfully and gently through life. And so we'll be offering psychosocial education. We also offering mindful movement and meditation. So these 3 things form the core of our program. And we like to call what we do the ABCs of resilience. So the A stands for awareness, which is what we'll be focusing on talking about today. Awareness of our bodies, awareness of how we react or respond when stress happens in the body, and also being aware of the strengths that we have to help bolster our resilience. And tomorrow we'll be talking about balance. I mentioned emotional balance. We'll be also talking about nervous system balance. This idea of balance is not like, people talk about work-life balance, like you can log off at 5 o'clock and then that's it. But sometimes that's not realistic. So balance is not about 50-50 equilibrium, but balance is about when my nervous system kind of activates, how can I come back to a sense of equilibrium? And maybe I need to do that 6 times within 3 minutes. So just having that awareness to know how to cultivate balance. And then the C stands for connection. So connecting not only to our bodies, but also connecting to other people. This kind of pandemic has really upended so much of our lives. And one of them is connection in real time. So we can still have connection as we are having it in this space together over Zoom. So how do we deepen and strengthen connections to other people so that we can feel supported and to be able to move through with more resilience, dealing with the challenging situations in our lives? So that's our core of our program, these three components of psychosocial education, mindful movement and meditation, and what we call this ABCs of resilience: awareness, balance, and connection. So I mentioned that our program is called CBR, and it's contemplative-based resilience. So this idea of contemplative-based, it's contemplative practices. So contemplative practices help us to cultivate self-awareness, to be more present, and to be more aware of our thoughts, our feelings, and our emotions. So in CBR, we focus on mindful movement and meditation as the contemplative practices, and you might be incorporating those already in your life. Dance. Dance can be a contemplative practice. Going out for a walk in nature, prayer, journaling, doing art. All those things are different types of contemplative practices. The benefits of contemplative practices. So as you can see from this slide, contemplative practices help to enhance attention and concentration, flexible thinking. It helps our moods. It helps pro-social behavior, meaning we're feeling more open to feeling like we can connect to other people and that we want to reach out to other people. Contemplative practices also help to decrease things like stress and anxiety, rumination, which is going over thoughts again and again and again in the mind. It helps to lower our blood pressure and arthritic symptoms, because when we're feeling stress, the different physiological things that happen in the body, there's lots of them, but one of them is it can cause inflammation in the body. So when we have practices that help us return to that state of equilibrium and balance, it can help to actually lower the physical markers of stress in the body. Thich Nhat Hanh, who recently passed away, he's the Buddhist Vietnamese Zen master. He often talked about, how can you brush your teeth mindfully? How can you drink a cup of tea and know that there is sunshine in this tea? Because the sun has to shine on the tea leaves to help it grow. So can we really be very present to the daily activities that we do? And when we bring in that sense of mindfulness, it can really help us feel more grounded and more open and more capable to deal with what life throws at us. And this quote is often attributed to Viktor Frankl, who's a Holocaust survivor. And he also started a branch of psychology that really focuses on the humanistic aspects of people. And he talks, this quote says, between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And so when we talk about contemplative practices, when we cultivate self-awareness, it allows us hopefully to have a little bit of space, that we can take a bit of a pause, like, oh, I'm noticing my stomach is knotting up right now because I'm feeling nervous. And if I don't take care of that feeling, maybe that nervousness, that bunching up in the stomach gets really rigid, and I start to not breathe as well, so then I start to talk faster and faster and faster and faster. But with a contemplative practice or with mindfulness, I can notice, my stomach is tightening. So what can I do? Let me soften my shoulders. Let me see if I can actively soften my stomach muscles and then stay very present. Right now, I'm really feeling my feet on the ground while I'm talking to you, because it is kind of a little bit nerve-wracking to talk in front of a group. So between stimulus and response, there's a space. Just a moment, a pause. And in that pause, in that space, is our power to choose our response, because otherwise our body will do what it does and we might react. And just think about the times that you haven't slept well, that you feel really overwhelmed and overloaded with work, and you might just snap, and that's just a natural reaction of the body, is just to snap. Just say something with an irritated voice to tell people to go away, and there's nothing wrong with that. I'm not saying that, once you practice meditation, you'll never snap. But if we have a contemplative practice, we can have more ability to choose our response. And so when we're able to choose that response, we have agency and we can feel empowered. And then therein lies our growth and our freedom, which is another way to say resilience. When we're able to choose our response, it's a way for us to practice resilience. So speaking of resilience, so sometimes, or kind of the common definition of resilience is bouncing back. When we talk about resilience, people say bouncing back. But think about if you are in very challenging and demanding situations, and every time you feel like, overwhelmed, just bouncing back to the same challenges and the same overwhelm. So in our program, we're not just interested in this kind of balance as coming back to a baseline where you still have a lot of stress. We might not be able to change the amount of stress that we have, but perhaps through the things that we offer, through the things that you already know how to do, we can think about how do we respond flexibly to the challenging situations. So we're not just returning to a state of baseline, but I teach teens, and one of the teens said, it's bouncing back with more power and smarts. So it's not just bouncing back to baseline, but bouncing back with more power and smarts. And I would like to just share that resilience is both innate traits that we're born with and traits that we can cultivate. And you may feel more resilient in one area in your life than another. So for example, I feel really resilient in my work life. I've tried to create really healthy boundaries about when I stop answering emails, about how much I engage the politics of an organization. So I feel really resilient in my workspace. When I go and talk to my dad, who I don't live with and haven't lived with for many years, I don't feel as resilient. So you even think about resilience as different in different parts of your life, but really it's about our adaptability, our flexibility, and our chances to just be with the ebbs and flows of what's going on with life. So like I mentioned, we can't control the sources of stress, but we can change how we respond. And sometimes, I listen to a bunch of podcasts, and sometimes these podcasts are like live your best life kind of podcasts. They're like, well, if you have work that is so overwhelming and you feel burnt out, leave that job. And I was thinking that might not be possible for a bunch of different factors. And one being, I have a family to support and I have to pay my rent. So it's not just easy about leaving a job. And if your job is what causes you the most stress in your daily life, and I can't leave that job, how can I perhaps change my relationship with the stress, the stressors, and the job? So really about kind of reframing and taking a wider perspective of how do I bolster my resilience if I can't change my external sources of stress. So you see on this slide that talks about the characteristics of resilience. These are just a few. These are not this is not a comprehensive list, but these are also scientifically researched. So as I talk through them, just want to invite you to think, which one of these do you recognize in yourself? So these characteristics: effective problem-solving skills, optimism, confidence, ability to cope with stress, maintaining connections with others, having a sense of meaning and purpose in life, able to regulate my emotions. I would add gratitude, a sense of appreciation and beauty, hope. Humor is a resilience trait. None of us are exempt from aging, illness, and eventually death. And so if we can skillfully navigate our sources of suffering and stress, then we can stay positive. So not from the moment that it happens, I'm like, I got to learn something from this. I got to be patient with myself. I got to go through the cycle of the emotions grief might bring up or stress might bring up. And so it's both a being with what's happening and then working with what's happening. And we'll segue from here into mindful movement, because movement can help us both be with and work with what's going on in our lives. Especially if you're feeling a lot of stress, it has physical effects on the body. Our muscles tense, our heartbeat goes faster, so it makes our blood circulate a certain way. There can be a lot of physical effects of stress on the body, which Sharon will go through later on to really talk us through that stress response. But you can even think about it in yourself. Right now, how are you feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? How stressed might you be? And if you're on a higher end of stress, how is that showing up in the body? And if you're on the lower end of stress, how is that showing up in the body? And that's our foundational question of mindful movement in our CBR practice, is how does this show up in the body? Because the body holds a lot of wisdom, but often we bypass the body because we think we're brain smart. It's like, oh, I read that thing in a book, so I'm going to do that thing. But really leaning into that wisdom of the body. So I'm going to ask you to lean into the wisdom of your body and do some sort of movement that feels good. Taking an intuitive movement. We've been sitting for almost an hour now. So if that means standing up, if that means going to use the bathroom, that is a movement. My feet are walking to somewhere else, right? So just doing any movement that feels good in the body. And then once you're ready, I'll invite us into some collective movement, and you can do that either sitting or standing, your choice. If you're sitting on your sofa or in a chair, I just encourage you to perhaps move a little bit more forward towards the edge of what you're sitting on so that your feet can be fully on the ground. And we'll start with some gentle neck circles. So when you're ready, letting your head rotate very gently, thinking more about the chin going down into the chest rather than your head going back. So you want to make sure you don't crunch the cervical spine when you bring your head back. Just notice how that feels as you circle the neck. Gently go the other direction. In addition to noticing how it feels, maybe you've noticed sounds. Maybe you notice sensations, not just in the neck, but in another part of the body. And then we'll pause from there and move to rolling through the shoulders. So letting the shoulders roll up, back, and down. So I mentioned sometimes when we're feeling stressed, because our muscles can get tense and tight. And then we can start to also feel tightness or even inflammation in the joints. So what we're doing here is just rolling through the joints, the neck, the shoulders, go the other direction with the rolls. And then you choose the speed of how fast you're going, how slow you're going. I'm going to ask you to play around with it a little bit. Maybe roll one shoulder and then the other. Notice what it's like to allow your body to feel freedom in the upper half of the torso. Good, and then pause from there. And start to roll through your torso. So if you're sitting in a chair, maybe you feel the weight shift in your sit bones. If you're standing, have your hula hoop moment. Go the other direction. Good, and then pause from there. If you're standing, you can hold on to a chair or a wall to help your balance and take one leg out and then circle the leg, circle the ankle. So you can do that from seated or standing. And the body might not be ready for like balancing while you're standing. So please feel free to hold on to something for support. Circle the leg and the ankle the other direction. I don't know about you, but circling my leg and the ankle at the same time takes a lot of mental concentration. And then so you can just shake out that leg. We'll go to the other one, your other leg, if you have two legs. Circling the leg, circling the ankle. And going the other direction. Good, and then pause. If you're feeling both your feet back onto the ground, just notice how that series of joint rotations felt like in the body. We'll do a little bit more movement together with the right arm lifting first, right arm stretching up. And as you exhale, take a side lean over to the left. And you want to feel like you're lifting from your waist all the way out through your fingertips without overextending the arm. So really feel like you can soften your right shoulder down. And then you choose how far you want to lean. If the body's feeling a little tired and it's like, don't lean so much, please listen to that messaging. But if you feel like, oh, this actually feels like it's helping the stretch is helping something in the body, really lean into that sensation as well. Let's take one more breath in and out. Lowering the hand down. Let's do the other side. Inhale, lift the left arm up. And on an exhalation, side lean over to the right. And sometimes our minds are very eager, like, yeah, side lean the most out of anyone in this space. But then our bodies react to it. So give yourself that space to respond skillfully, to find freedom in the body, and then slowly release. And take our hands in front of us, little light fists if you want, or open hands, twisting from side to side. So if you're sitting in a chair like I am, I'm sitting a little bit more forward so I can clear the back of my chair. And you choose, we're going to do this for about 45 seconds. So that might seem like a short time or a long time. Just notice how fast you like to go. And when I say you, I mean your body. How fast would your body like to go? Sometimes we're like, yeah, lots of vigorous movement. And maybe the body wants a little slower movement. Notice if you want to change your arms now and let your arms do something else as you move your spine side to side. And for our last 15 seconds or so, notice if the body doesn't want to twist anymore and it wants to do something completely different. Give yourself full permission to do so. And I'll count us down, 3, 2, and 1, and then pause. Even though the physical body might not be moving anymore, notice what is. Can you feel your breath moving? Can you feel your heartbeat? Can you feel sensation? For one moment before we gather back together, just taking stock about how do you feel? And the answer does not have to be good. You could feel irritated after the movement practice. And that's okay. We reflect without judgment about what shows up in the body. Your eyes are closed. Slowly blink your eyes open. Before we segue, just taking a moment to check in, seeing how you feel. Do you feel a difference from before we started moving to now?
I know going through awareness of stress and its causes and manifestations is probably quite familiar to many of you, perhaps all of you, but we're going to do it quickly anyway. And one of the benefits I've seen is that it's a reminder for people not to take personally some of the reactions that they're having. I've seen so many times, with people in, I don't know what to call it. Usually we call it caregiving. I always think that's not a powerful enough word. Um, People in some kind of service to others. So many times where people start to feel I'm not doing my job well. Um, I I just can't do enough. I'm all wrong. I should be better. I don't know why I'm so upset. I don't know why this isn't inspiring anymore. And I found it a powerful reminder that it's not that you're not doing your job well. It's not that you are incapable. It's actually usually because we care. And in that process of caring, we run into limits, we run into boundaries, we run into some need for balance in the sense of compassion for ourselves as well as for someone else. We run into reality about things. And so we face challenge, we face difficulty. It's also been really helpful for me to remind myself, and sort of an echo of what Chachi just said, that the stress dynamic is a dynamic. There's the stressor, the pressure, the responsibility, sometimes the trauma, the tragedy that we are facing, and then there's the resource with which it's met. And it's not to say that we never try to do anything about the circumstance. Of course, we might, but it's almost like our secret power is that resource. And we know that just from an ordinary day, right? Like if you haven't slept and you're tired to begin with, and then you overhear a conversation, it's not just mildly annoying, it's overwhelmingly annoying because you don't have a lot of inner wherewithal with which to meet it. Or if you feel really alone, misunderstood, unseen in some way, and you are facing a certain challenge, it's so much harder than if you feel you are part of a community in some way. And so we look at all of this very much with those things in mind. As Chachi said, there's an effect on our nervous system. I've seen that as well. I remember going to a lecture about stress and the vagus nerve and things that happen just in the nervous system from an overwhelming sense of stress. And I was with a woman who faced like an enormous difficulty, and she kept blaming herself for not being more on top of it. Why aren't I more in control of my reactions? Why aren't I doing better? And it was such a source of sorrow for her in her life. It was really a stumbling block. And so we went to this lecture, and it was kind of long and it was sort of very scientific in a very detailed way. And to my amazement, after this tremendous length of time, when it was ending, this woman that I was with, she turned to me and she was radiant. And she said to me, "It's not my fault. It's my nervous system." So I thought, oh, right. Here's the benefit of going through you could almost say more dispassionate understanding of what happens to us when stress is experienced as being overwhelming. And it was such a beautiful moment for me to see her, in effect, forgive herself for what she was experiencing and saying, oh, yeah, this is natural in a way. What might I do to bring a greater state of awareness or balance and connection to my experience? So stress is the state of arousal we experience when we confront a challenge, a threat, or a change. And I want to take a moment just to notice the difference between the words challenge, threat, or change. There's some work being done now where people are suggesting that if we can change our attitude, and it's true that there are many times we experience stress where it's seen as a challenge, not as a threat. And we feel mobilized by that. We want to get it together. We want to meet the challenge. We want to be excellent at what we do. But there are times when, not because of our attitude, because of the situation, it's like way too much. It's more than can be reasonably handled. And I just say all that because I find myself in a position often of trying to reassure people, don't feel bad, because it's too much. It feels like too much. I think that's reasonable. It's important that we allow ourselves that, and to understand that not everything other people see as merely challenging is experienced by us as merely challenging. What we want is a sense of reality. We want perspective to happen. One of the things, like I said, I went to India as a college student, and one of the common examples they use there is when you see a rope on the ground and you mistake it for a snake. And we don't want to be in a state of hypervigilance all the time, seeing every little rope as a snake, seeing threat where there is none. We want perspective. We want to have clarity about what is actually a threat and what we are maybe perceiving because of old habit or recent trauma or something as more threatening than it actually is. And so that's really our work. I'll also say that one of the key points of meditation practice is the ability to begin again. Here is another kind of resilience training. We maybe place our attention on something like the feeling of the breath, which we're going to do together in a little bit. And lo and behold, our attention wanders. We find ourselves thinking about the past, thinking about the future, judgment, speculation, something like that. And rather than call ourselves failure or consider ourselves weak or wrong or bad, we practice letting go and coming back to the feeling of the breath. If we get lost in a long spiral of judgment and self-condemnation and all of that, not only are we adding a considerable amount of time, perhaps, to the distraction, but we're so demoralized, we feel so exhausted that it's not onward leading. It's not a way to make progress. And so I say all that because the experience of being overwhelmed by stress will happen. And as much as we want a state of being able to maintain perfect equilibrium all the time, that's less likely to happen, but recovery can happen sooner and sooner and more gracefully and with more kindness toward ourselves and more understanding. And I say all that because I feel like through the years, I've seen so many people be what I would consider needlessly discouraged. And really, the things that used to take over for half a day are now lasting 20 minutes, which is not a really pleasant 20 minutes usually, but 20 minutes becomes 18 minutes, becomes 15 minutes, becomes 10 minutes. And it didn't move like from half a day right away to 20 minutes. It's a gradual sense of progress, but that's how it happens. And so it's not a sign that you're doing it wrong or things are not functioning. It's again a call to, let's see this process. Let's see how it unfolds, and give yourself a break and understand, oh yeah, it's inevitable that we get exhausted sometimes. We get overwhelmed sometimes. But our recovery happens sooner and sooner and sooner and sooner. And that makes a huge change in the quality of our lives. There are certainly different ways that we experience stress, the normal stress of a day. Um, Earlier when Shotzi said, is it Mercury in retrograde? I thought, oh, this isn't working in my computer and that's not working in my life. And, it's just normal to have stress. There's more acute stress. We have a deadline. We have, um, you know, something that is incredibly demanding. There is chronic stress, which is often not talked about enough. Life situation that is just wearing, not enough help, something like that. Critical incident, which certainly happens. We know secondary and vicarious trauma, which are stress, are usually used in the same term, which is again that kind of caregiver role. You're trying to help a friend, not happening that fast. You're taking care of somebody in your life. You are facing people who are really struggling day after day after day and trying to make a difference, and it's slow. And so there are many ways in which we kind of take on stress, not because our own life is so full of it, but because of that relationship to someone else. And that's real. I mean, that's the kind of thing that was often unaddressed and unappreciated for a very long time. So once again, there's a certain level of demand in our lives which we rise to, and that's considered. Sometimes it's inspiring. Sometimes we like a challenge. Sometimes we don't like the challenge that much, but we find we actually need it. I just turned in a book, a manuscript on Monday, which was the day it was due, which doesn't usually happen for me. And I felt very proud. And I had it very much in mind. It doesn't matter that I have to give up this other thing I'm doing or activity I want to do. Let's just do it. And it was good. And then there are ways in which it's just too much. Either we're not resting, we're not restoring, we're not practicing resilience in some way, and it's too much, or it is actually more than we can handle well. So what happens? Our performance starts to break down. We're so tired. We're so fatigued. We start getting unwell because there are consequences in the nervous system. And ultimately a kind of breakdown. One of the groups I've gotten to work with through the Garrison Institute have been international humanitarian aid workers, people, say, working in refugee camps around the world, things like that. And something I learned from them was that when stress starts being overwhelming, the first thing that you see is that people stop paying attention to safety protocols. So if there was a common understanding, even a requirement that you not walk in certain places, for example, that's what people started to do when they were kind of getting so overwhelmed that the stress was dictating their choices and their actions rather than having clarity or perspective. Common contributing factors to coming to a feeling of burnout, like it's all too much. One of the differences between even like very strong stress and burnout often has to do with a kind of worldview. Like work start seeing meaningless the contribution one can make. And often it is, of course, a big problem, a small contribution, because that's what's realistic, but it's never meaningless. In truth, it just starts feeling that way. And when that feeling of insufficiency takes over, it could never be enough, can never be right, then we're moving into the terrain of burnout. So there's a lot about worldview, vision, how we hold ourselves, how we hold our work that uh, really marks, okay, now I'm in burnout territory. So this is really what we pay attention to, with the understanding that they're tools. And we practice using the tools if we want, so that we have confidence and clarity about them. Sometimes we take up that practice, those kinds of practices, in sort of less compelling times. It's there's not so much trauma going on. It's more even, but that's a good time to practice. Those are times of like strength training, so that when there is a crisis, it's much more near at hand. But other times we don't have that luxury. Things are already in a kind of crisis mode, either externally or just even within ourselves. And that's fine too, because the tools are the tools. Often the tools of mindfulness are very simple in a way. And they certainly sound simple. And I went to India as an 18-year-old college student but I knew everything. I really knew nothing. But I would hear these recommendations, like the mindful movement would be a perfect example. And in all honesty, I'd be sitting there thinking, that's stupid. Like, how can something that simple make a difference? Which is why it was wonderful some of you spoke, and said, yeah, it makes a difference. Look at that, or feel your breath. That was the very first meditation instruction I ever heard. Sit down and feel your breath. It was January 1971, in the beginning of this intensive 10-day like immersion retreat in meditation practice. And the first instruction was feel your breath. Sit down and feel your breath. And I thought, feel my breath? I came all the way to India. Where's the magical, esoteric, fantastic technique that's going to wipe out all my childhood suffering and make me totally happy person? I've been going to college in Buffalo, New York. I thought I could have stayed in Buffalo to feel my breath. What's this? And then I thought, how hard can this be? And lo and behold, it was not that easy to actually do. And the effect was very profound, which you can kind of tell because I'm still doing it all these years later. But the tools themselves, and it's probably a good thing, really, are not that hard to understand. What's difficult is for us to practice. And it's the practicing of them that makes all the difference. And there are many tools, and that's an important consideration too. If tool number one doesn't work, try number two. It's not pass fail. It's not about not succeeding. It's about remembering the principles, knowing we have a capacity, and exercising it to come to greater balance. So, of course, we know that the normal understanding of what happens in high stress is fight or flight or freeze. We know that we get mobilized to fight, to counter, and that can be good, except when we're seeing a rope and everywhere thinking it's a snake, because then it's chronic and it's too much and it's exhausting. We may have more the habit of flight. We get like all the energy gets sucked in. We just want to run. And again, that can be very smart in a lot of situations, but maybe not every situation. we don't want this to be really habit and driving us all the time. And then freeze. I was so happy when they added freeze because I thought that's me, that's exactly what happens. I feel like a deer in the headlights, like, what am I supposed to do, in this really difficult time? So we want not to dismantle that by any means, but to have that process be regulated by perspective, wisdom, understanding. One of the great research findings of our time about mindfulness has happened in the military. And I've kind of watched that progression of the introduction of the possibility of some of these tools for veterans after you've served, after you've left active duty, and maybe you have post-traumatic stress. There's, a lot maybe not working in your life. And I've seen that experiment, where maybe these tools can help. And then I watched as various people in the military said, well, it seems to make a difference. What if it was more part of basic training? These tools, so that people maybe would not suffer so very much as they went along, as they faced, sometimes tremendous difficulty and so on. And so that's where a lot of it is happening. I've seen the introduction of these tools for military families, for spouses, for even children. And one of the great findings was about executive function, which you could call clarity in decision making. And the example is used, in those contexts of you see a little something out of the corner of your eye, and you want to know it is a threat or it's not a threat, right? You don't want to have what they call emotional hijack, where fight or flight just overwhelms you immediately without perspective taking, without clarity, because terrible, terrible things can happen that way. You want to have that moment of like checking it out, and then you can respond more appropriately. And they found that that is maybe the highest change in people as they utilize these tools. So I find that fascinating, because it's not that you want to dismantle the system, because that would be really bad, in terms of responding to snakes that are actually coiled up on that outdoor staircase. You want, to have some wisdom, and you want to take in the wisdom of others, but we don't want to be driven by what can be some very old and not so appropriate anymore reactions that we've just trained to. So we practice. The main tool I have used throughout my life clearly is meditation practice. There are lots of forms, there are lots of styles. One of the it's, in a way, it's kind of progression. There's meditation and stillness. Somebody mentioned bringing mindfulness into activity, which absolutely is part of it. And there are ways that meditation practice can build upon itself. We often start with something like the feeling of the breath. It doesn't have to be the breath, but it's something to rest our awareness on. And the word is rest. I once turned in a manuscript which had a lot of guided meditations in it, and the editor wrote back and said, "You're using the word rest a lot. Are you very tired?" And I wrote back and I said, "Well, probably, but that's the word." We have a chosen object. You don't want to like grab it tight, because then you'll be more uptight and your mind will wander more. We want to rest our attention on that object. And most importantly, your mind will wander. We have to understand that. It's not because you're doing it wrong. It's not because you're incapable. That's what happens. But we learn to recognize that we've been distracted. And rather than fall into a lot of judgment, we practice letting go. We practice beginning again. Just bring your attention back to that object. Say the feeling of the breath. And it doesn't have to be the breath. There are many styles of practice. It could be a word, it could be an image, could be a sound, could be a prayer, could be something else happening in your body, could be phrases of loving kindness, which we'll do a little later in this time together. Many people say something like the breath, if possible, for at least a part of your practice is good, because as my first meditation teacher said, the breath is very portable. So let's say you use it in your formal practice, which could be, let's say 12 minutes a day, because my neuroscientist friend who works with the military said 12 minutes a day. So let's say 12 minutes a day is your formal dedicated practice. And then you're commuting, or you're working outside your home, or you're working in your home on Zoom, and somebody else is getting angry and you're getting anxious. And you can feel that you're about to lose it in some way. Just take a few breaths. It's totally private. Nobody has to know you're doing it. You don't have to close your eyes and look strange. You don't need equipment. Just take a breath or two. And when you do that, you return to the moment, you return to your values, you return to what you really care about. It's just right there. Okay, here I am. So if not the breath, and I'm told by a number of people in COVID times that it's difficult sometimes to use the breath, then something else happening in your body, or listening to sound, something you don't need to manufacture. But I'll guide us through sitting now as though it were the breath, and you can extrapolate if you're using something else. The important principles are resting and being able to return no matter what. You have not failed. It's not a problem if you let go and begin again. Because just think for a moment how many times a day in life we have to do that. We're going down a certain direction and we realize we need a course correction. We have to make an adjustment, or we have fallen down and we have to pick ourselves up or let someone else help us up. We begin again. So many times. And so it's like a very transferable skill from meditation to life itself. You can sit comfortably, just be at ease again. Close your eyes or not, however feels best to you, and you can also change midway. And we'll start just by listening to sound. The sound of my voice or other sounds. Allowing our experience to come and go. Just let the sounds wash through you. And bring your attention to the feeling of your body sitting, whatever sensations you discover. Bring your attention to your hands and see if you can move from the more conceptual level, let go fingers, to the world of direct sensation, picking up, pulsing, throbbing, pressure, whatever it might be. You don't have to name these things, but feel them. And on that same level of picking up sensations, bring your attention to the feeling of the breath. Once again, this is the normal, natural breath. You don't have to try to make your breath deeper or different. You can feel where it's strongest for you. The nostrils, the chest, or the abdomen. Bring your attention there and just rest. See if you can feel one breath without concern for what's already gone by, without leaning forward for even the very next breath. Just this one. If you like, you can use a quiet mental notation like in, out, or rising, falling to help support the awareness of the breath, but very quiet. So your attention is really going to feeling the breath, one breath at a time. And if images or sounds or sensations or emotions should arise, but they're not that strong, if you can stay connected to the feeling of the breath, just let them flow on by. You're breathing. It's just one breath. If something is strong and it like picks you up and whirls you away, you get lost in thought, spun out in a fantasy, or you fall asleep, truly don't worry about it. We say the most important moment is the next moment, where we practice letting go and we practice beginning again. No matter how many times you have to do that, it's totally fine. We say the healing is in the return, not in never having wandered to begin with. It's all right. You realize you're a million miles away. See if you can gently let go. and simply return. No judgment, no blame. We start over. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze and we'll end the meditation.
And just invite us into a very short closing. If you'd like to place one hand on the chest, one hand on the stomach, just taking a moment to connect here with your own body. Rest in the breath. And then I'll invite us to close together by collectively taking a breath in and out.